The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, lazy shadows across the vast expanse of the supermarket parking lot. It was that time of day when the heat of the afternoon had baked the asphalt into a shimmering blanket, and the air felt thick and heavy. People moved with a certain hurriedness, eager to finish their errands and escape to the cool comfort of their homes. Car doors slammed, shopping bags rustled, and the distant hum of traffic created a constant, buzzing backdrop to the scene. In the middle of this controlled chaos, a small, quiet struggle was taking place. One that was almost completely invisible to the rushing crowd. An elderly woman, her frame slight and stooped with the weight of many years, was tasked with a job far bigger than it appeared. She was gathering the stray shopping carts, the ones left haphazardly near parking spots or abandoned by the curb. She had managed to collect a long train of them, perhaps 7 or 8, all linked together. They were a motley crew of metal and wire, some with wobbly wheels that screeched in protest, others with baskets full of discarded receipts and trash. Pushing them was a battle. The metal handle was cold and rough against her palms, and the combined weight of the carts felt like it was anchored to the ground. With every step, she had to lean her whole body into it, her worn-out sneakers gripping the hot pavement. Her face was a roadmap of a life well lived, with fine lines etched around her eyes and mouth. Her hair, a soft silver, was pinned back neatly from her face. She wore a simple, faded floral dress and a pair of sensible orthopedic shoes, the kind chosen for comfort over style. There was a deep weariness in her movements, a persistent ache in her lower back that flared with every shove. She would push the train of carts a few feet, and then one of the back wheels would catch, causing the whole line to jackknife to one side. She would have to stop, walk back, and manually yank the stubborn wheel back into line, her breath coming in short, quiet puffs. It was a Sisyphean task, an endless loop of pushing and correcting. With the cart corral still a daunting 50 yards away, no one seemed to notice. A young mother, busy trying to buckle a restless toddler into a car seat, walked right past her, her mind completely consumed with her child. A man in a crisp business suit, his phone pressed to his ear, strode by without a glance, his voice loud and authoritative as he discussed some important deal. A group of teenagers laughed loudly, their music thumping from their car, completely oblivious to the slow, determined drama unfolding just a few feet away. They weren't bad people. They were just wrapped up in their own worlds, their own tasks, their own bubbles of existence. The woman's struggle was silent, and in a world full of noise, it was easy to ignore. She paused for a moment, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. She looked at the long line of carts, then at the distant corral, and let out a sigh that was so soft it was almost swallowed by the sounds of the parking lot. It was a sigh of pure exhaustion, a sound that held a lifetime of small, hard battles. She adjusted her grip on the handle, the rough metal digging into her soft skin, and prepared to push again. Her shoulders ached, her knees throbbed, and a feeling of being overwhelmed washed over her. It was just for a moment, a flicker of despair in an otherwise resilient spirit, but it was there. She felt small and invisible, like a single, forgotten blade of grass in a massive, manicured lawn, leaning against the trunk of a plain, unassuming car not too far away. A figure stood apart from the frantic energy of the lot. He was a man, tall and lean, dressed in a simple t-shirt, worn jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He had just finished loading his own few bags of groceries into the trunk, but instead of getting into his car and driving away, he had lingered. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't in a rush. He was just watching, his gaze quiet and observant, taking in the small human moments that most people miss. He saw the young mother's frustration, the businessman's self-importance, the teenager's careless joy. And then his eyes settled on the elderly woman. He watched her for a long time. He saw the way she struggled with the weight of the carts, the grimace of pain that she tried to hide, the way her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He saw the moment she paused, the quiet sigh of defeat. He didn't see just an old woman doing a chore. He saw a person, a human being facing a difficult moment alone. He saw the story in her hands, the history in her face, the incredible effort in every single movement. The world around her was a blur of motion and noise, but to him, she had become the only thing that was in focus. He felt a pull, a simple, undeniable human connection. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper, something more like recognition. A recognition of a shared vulnerability, a universal experience of needing a hand when things get too heavy. The thought that crossed his mind wasn't a grand, heroic one. It was simple, clear, and absolute. Someone should help her. And as he stood there watching her take a deep breath and prepare for another grueling push, he realized that someone could be him. The man remained leaning against his car, a solitary island of stillness in an ocean of movement. The world around him was a symphony of small, rushed sounds, the sharp beep of a car being unlocked, the metallic clang of a shopping cart being folded, the distant wail of a child who wanted a toy. But these sounds seemed to wash over him without leaving a mark. He wasn't waiting for anyone, nor was he lost in thought about some grand plan. He was simply present, his hands resting lightly in the pockets of his worn jeans, his baseball cap casting a shadow over his face. His car, like his clothes, was unremarkable, a practical vehicle that served its purpose without demanding attention. It was clean but not polished. A tool, not a trophy, his eyes, gentle and observant, moved slowly across the parking lot, taking in the small human dramas that played out every single day, unseen and unrecorded. He saw a young couple arguing in hushed, urgent tones by their trunk, their frustration a tight knot between them. He saw a store employee, barely out of his teens, pushing a long line of carts with a practiced, weary efficiency, his face a mask of boredom. He saw a father tossing his young daughter into the air, her squeals of delight cutting through the afternoon air like a burst of sunshine. These were the threads of everyday life, the tiny, beautiful, and sometimes painful moments that stitched the world together. Most people were too busy living their own thread to notice the others, but he had always been a watcher, and then his gaze stopped. It was drawn, as if by an invisible force, to the scene near the far edge of the lot. The elderly woman. He had noticed her before in a peripheral way, but now he truly saw her. He watched as she wrestled with the train of carts, her body a study in quiet determination. He saw the way her thin arms trembled with the effort, the muscles in her forearms straining against the uncooperative weight. He noticed how one of the wheels on the third cart was squeaky, letting out a rhythmic, piercing cry with every rotation, a sound that must have been drilling into her head. He saw her adjust her feet, trying to get a better stance on the uneven pavement. Her sensible shoes scuffing against the ground, a deep sense of focus settled over him. The arguing couple, the tired employee, the laughing father, they all faded into a soft blur. The only thing that was sharp, that was real, was this woman and her struggle. He wasn't seeing her through a lens of pity or condescension. It was something much purer, more fundamental. He was seeing a problem. A heavy, awkward, stubborn problem that one person was trying to solve alone. He could almost feel the cold, rough metal of the cart handle in his own hands, could almost feel the strain in his own back and shoulders. It was a kind of empathy that went beyond thought. It was a physical, visceral resonance. He thought about how many times he had seen something similar. A person trying to lift a stroller up a flight of stairs. Someone struggling to change a flat tire on the side of a busy road. A person dropping their groceries, apples, and cans rolling away in every direction. And in most of these moments, the crowd simply flows around the struggle, like a river around a stone. People are busy, people are late, people are lost in their own worlds. It's not always malice. It's often just a profound, unintentional blindness. But he had always felt a pull in these moments, a quiet voice that said, "You can help. You should help." He watched as she stopped for a moment, her shoulders slumping. It was just for a second, a brief sag of defeat before she straightened up again, ready for another push. In that small gesture, he saw a lifetime of resilience. He saw the story of a person who had faced countless small battles and had always found the strength to keep going. There was a dignity in her struggle that was deeply moving. It wasn't a grand, heroic fight against a monstrous enemy. It was the mundane, grinding, and utterly human fight against gravity and metal and fatigue. And in its own way, it was just as important. The sun glinted off the chrome of the carts, forcing him to squint. He could feel the heat radiating up from the asphalt, a wave of warmth that made the air shimmer. He thought about his own life, about the strange bubble he often lived in, where people were eager to help him, to open doors, to offer things for free. It was a kind of inverse reality where his presence made things easier, not harder. But moments like this were a grounding force, a reminder of the real world, of the universal experience of effort and exhaustion. They were a reminder that underneath all the labels and all the surfaces, people are just people trying to get their cart from point A to point B. He continued to watch, his body perfectly still. The decision was forming in his mind, not as a dramatic, lightning bolt moment, but as a slow, quiet dawning. It was the simplest thing in the world. He had 2 strong arms and a strong back. He was rested. The task before her was difficult for her, but it would be easy for him. It was an equation of basic physics and basic human decency. The imbalance of it felt wrong. The universe in his mind tended towards balance, towards kindness. This was a small opportunity to help nudge things in the right direction. He could feel the familiar, gentle pull of responsibility. It wasn't a burden. It was a privilege. The chance to step out of the role of the observer and become a participant, to add his own small thread to the fabric of this woman's day. He imagined the relief she would feel, the simple, unspoken gratitude of having a weight lifted both literally and figuratively. He didn't do it for thanks or for recognition. The reward was in the act itself, in the quiet satisfaction of making something a little bit easier for someone else. His posture changed almost imperceptibly. He pushed himself off the trunk of his car, standing up to his full height. The stillness was broken. The moment of observation was over. The quiet resolve in his eyes had hardened into a gentle intention. He took a breath, the hot air filling his lungs, and then he began to walk. His steps were not rushed or frantic. They were calm, purposeful, and steady. He was no longer an island. He was a bridge about to connect 2 separate worlds, and in doing so, make both of them a little bit stronger. His steps were calm and measured, a stark contrast to the hurried scurrying of the other shoppers. He crossed the faded white lines of the parking spaces, his eyes fixed on the woman and her unwieldy train of carts. The distance between them shrank slowly, and as he drew closer, he could hear the squeaky wheel more clearly, a high-pitched rhythmic protest against the hot asphalt. He could see the fine sheen of sweat on her brow, glistening in the late afternoon sun. He saw the tight set of her jaw, a sign of pure, stubborn effort. She was so focused on her task, so completely absorbed in the physical struggle, that she was completely unaware of his approach. He slowed his pace as he got within a few feet, not wanting to startle her. He could see her knuckles were white where she gripped the cold metal bar. He waited for a moment, for a natural pause in her exertion. She had just managed to straighten the line of carts after another jackknife, and she took a quick, sharp breath, preparing for another push. That was the moment. It was a small opening in her wall of concentration. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. His voice was not loud, but it was clear and gentle, cutting through the noise of the parking lot with a quiet authority. "That looks like a real handful. Let me give you a hand with that." The woman flinched slightly, her head snapping up. Her eyes, which had been narrowed in concentration, widened in surprise. For a second, there was a flicker of apprehension in her gaze, a natural caution when a stranger appears suddenly at your side. She saw a tall man in a simple t-shirt and a baseball cap, his face partially in shadow. He wasn't smiling in a flashy way, but there was a warmth in his eyes, a look of genuine concern that was immediately disarming. Her initial surprise quickly gave way to confusion. Why was this man talking to her? What did he want? "Oh," she stammered, her voice a little breathless. I'm all right. I can manage." It was an automatic response born from a lifetime of self-reliance. Pride is a funny thing. Even when you're struggling, it's hard to admit you need help. The man didn't argue or insist. He just gave a small, understanding nod. "I'm sure you can," he said, his tone respectful, not patronizing. "But it's no trouble for me, really." He didn't wait for another protest. Instead, he moved to the side of the long line of carts, positioning himself just behind her. He didn't try to take the handle from her or push her aside. He simply reached out and placed his hands on the metal bar, a good foot or so away from hers. His presence was a statement in itself. It said, "I'm not taking over. I'm joining you." The woman felt a sudden shift in the weight she was pushing. It was like a heavy blanket had been lifted off her shoulders. The immense, grinding resistance of the carts suddenly felt manageable, almost light. She looked down and saw his strong, tanned hands gripping the bar, his knuckles relaxed, his muscles ready. He wasn't putting on a show of strength. He was simply adding his own to hers. The tension in her own arms and shoulders began to melt away, replaced by a warm, spreading sense of relief. It was so profound it almost brought tears to her eyes. She hadn't realized just how much she was struggling until the struggle was gone. "Okay," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Thank you." Together they took the first step. The train of carts, which had previously screeched and groaned in protest, now moved with a surprising smoothness. The wobbly wheel at the back still squeaked, but its cry seemed less desperate now, more like a cheerful chirp. They found a rhythm almost instantly. He would push and she would guide, their movements falling into a natural syncopation. It was no longer her fight. It was their shared task. They moved in silence for a few moments, the only sounds being the rhythmic squeak of the wheel and the soft crunch of their shoes on the pavement. The woman could feel the warmth radiating from his arm, so close to hers. He smelled faintly of soap and fresh air, a clean, simple scent. She glanced sideways at him, trying to see his face under the brim of his cap. There was something familiar about him, a sense of quiet calm that was both comforting and intriguing. But she couldn't place it, and in that moment it didn't really matter. What mattered was the feeling of being seen, of not being alone in her struggle. "You're very kind," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was stronger now, more steady. He turned his head slightly and gave her a small, genuine smile. It wasn't a big, toothy grin, but a gentle curve of his lips that reached his eyes. "It's nothing," he said. "Honestly, we're almost there." He nodded towards the cart corral, which was now much closer, no longer a distant, daunting goal. The man felt a quiet satisfaction deep inside. This was the kind of moment that made life rich. It wasn't about money or fame or success. It was about this simple, tangible connection. He could feel the rough texture of the cart handle under his palms, the slight vibration as the wheels rolled over a crack in the pavement. He could feel the woman's presence beside him, no longer tense with effort but moving with a new lightness. He wasn't thinking about how this might look to anyone else. He wasn't thinking about himself at all. He was just focused on the shared purpose of getting these carts to where they needed to be. He was just a man helping another person. It felt, in a way he couldn't explain, like coming home to himself. As they walked, the world around them seemed to fade away. The cars, the people, the noise all became a soft, indistinct background. Their small bubble of shared effort was the only thing that felt real. The woman found herself studying his hands again. They were capable hands, with a few small scars and calluses, the hands of a man who was not afraid of work. They were hands that were offering help without asking for anything in return. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like one of the most profound things she had ever experienced. In a world that often felt cold and indifferent, this small act of kindness was a powerful reminder of the goodness that still existed, quietly and without fanfare, in the most ordinary of places. The last few yards to the cart corral seemed to pass in a comfortable, shared silence. The rhythm they had found was steady and sure, a quiet partnership of movement. For the woman, the experience was surreal. Just moments ago, she had been locked in a lonely, painful battle with these very same carts. Now, with this stranger's help, the task felt almost effortless. She could feel the strength in his arms, a quiet, confident power that made her own contribution feel light and easy. She wasn't just being helped. She was part of a team. It was a strange and wonderful feeling, a sense of connection she hadn't realized she was missing. She glanced at the profile of his face, still mostly hidden by the cap. and felt a wave of gratitude so profound it made her heart ache a little. It wasn't just for the physical help. It was for the fact that he had seen her. He had noticed her struggle and had chosen to step into her world, if only for a minute. As they reached the designated area, a neat collection of metal bars painted bright red, he didn't just shove the carts forward. He guided them with care, his hands still on the handle, slowing their momentum. He maneuvered the long train into an empty slot with a practiced ease, lining them up perfectly alongside the others. There was a series of satisfying metallic clangs as the carts settled into their new home, a sound of finality and completion. The last squeaky wheel gave its final chirp and then fell silent. The noise was gone. The struggle was over. He let go of the handle, and then she did too. Her hands feeling strangely light and empty without the familiar weight of the cold metal, she turned to him fully, ready to pour out all the thanks she felt building up inside her. "Thank you," she began, her voice a little shaky. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done. Those things were—" She trailed off, unable to find the right words to describe the difficulty. He just gave her that same gentle, warm smile. It was a smile that didn't just show on his lips. It crinkled the corners of his eyes, making them look kind and alive. "It was really no trouble at all," he said, his voice calm and sincere. "Are you okay? You didn't hurt yourself, did you?" He wasn't just being polite. He was genuinely asking, his eyes scanning her face with a look of real concern. The question caught her off guard. People didn't usually ask if she was okay. They assumed because she was old that she was either always fine or always falling apart. They never just stopped to ask. "Oh no, I'm fine," she said, a little flustered. "Just a bit tired. My back isn't what it used to be." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "I know the feeling," he said with a nod, his tone full of understanding. He didn't dismiss her complaint or offer unsolicited advice. He just accepted it, creating a space of shared human experience. He stood there for a moment, not in a hurry to leave, as if making sure she was truly all right. And in that moment, as she looked at him, really looked at him, something shifted in her perception. The way the afternoon light hit his face, the familiar yet unplaceable quality of his voice, the intense kindness in his eyes. It all clicked into place. It wasn't a sudden jolt of recognition, but a slow, dawning realization. Like a photograph coming into focus in a tray of developer. Her breath caught in her throat. Oh, my. It was him. The man from the movies. The one everyone said was kind. The one they called the internet's boyfriend. She had seen his face on posters and screens, but seeing it in person in this ordinary parking lot, after such an extraordinary act of simple kindness, was something else entirely. A part of her wanted to gasp, to say his name, but another, stronger part of her told her not to. To do so would break the spell. It would turn this beautiful, human moment into something about celebrity and fame. It would cheapen it. And she had a feeling that's the last thing he would want. So she kept it to herself. The knowledge was a warm, glowing secret inside her. She just looked at him, her eyes wide with a new kind of awe, and said, "Well, you're a very good young man. The world needs more people like you." He seemed to get a little embarrassed by the praise, shifting his weight slightly and looking down for a second. "We all just have to look out for each other," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then he looked back up at her. "Do you need any help getting to your car? Or with your bags?" She shook her head, a genuine smile now spreading across her face. "No, I'm all set. My car is just right over there. But thank you, again, for everything." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. He nodded, accepting her thanks with a simple grace. "Okay then," he said. "You take care of yourself now?" He gave her one last, small nod, a gesture of respect that felt more meaningful than a handshake. Then he turned and began to walk away, back towards his own plane. Unassuming car, she stood there for a long moment, watching him go. He didn't look back. He didn't rush. He just walked away with the same calm, steady pace he had approached her with. He was just a man leaving a supermarket, but to her, he was so much more. She looked down at her hands, then at the neat row of carts he had helped her tame. The physical ache in her back was still there, a dull reminder of her age, but the heavy weight in her spirit, the one she had been carrying for so long, the feeling of being invisible and alone, was completely gone. In its place was a lightness, a warmth, a renewed sense of hope. The world, with all its hurry and its indifference, had just shown her a moment of pure, selfless grace. And it was more than enough to get her through the day. He didn't wait for a round of applause or even for her to say anything more. His part in this small drama was over. He turned and walked away, his back straight, his steps unhurried. There was no swagger in his walk, no hint that he felt he had done anything special. He was just a man finishing an errand, moving from one moment to the next. The setting sun caught the brim of his baseball cap, casting his face in shadow once again, turning him back into an anonymous figure in the crowd. He reached his plain car, unlocked the door with a soft beep, and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment he sat there, not driving off, but just looking ahead. Perhaps he was thinking about what to make for dinner. Perhaps he was just enjoying a moment of quiet. The engine started with a low rumble, and he pulled out of the parking space, merging into the flow of traffic and disappearing without a trace. He was gone, but the feeling he left behind hung in the cooling air like the scent of rain after a storm. The elderly woman remained standing by the cart corral, a solitary statue in the fading light. She watched his car until its red taillights were just two tiny specks in the distance. A deep, slow breath filled her lungs, a breath she felt like she hadn't been able to take properly for years. The ache in her lower back was still there, a dull, persistent throb, but it seemed distant now, unimportant. It was as if his kindness had been a powerful painkiller, targeting not her body, but her spirit. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had been gripping the cold metal handle just minutes before. They felt fragile and wrinkled, but also capable. They felt seen. She thought about his hands next to hers, strong and sure, not taking over, but simply helping. It was the purest form of help she had ever experienced. The secret of who he was bubbled up inside her again, a warm, fizzy feeling. She would never tell a soul, not because no one would believe her, but because it was a gift just for her. It was a beautiful, perfect moment that belonged only to her, a memory she could take out and polish on lonely days. She felt a smile spread across her face, a real, genuine smile that reached all the way to her eyes. The world hadn't just been made a little easier for her. It had been made a little brighter. From a few parking spots away, another pair of eyes had been watching the entire scene unfold. A young mother was sitting in the driver's seat of her minivan, the engine idling softly. She had been trying to get her two young children settled in their car seats, a task that required the patience of a saint and the negotiation skills of a diplomat. "I don't want to go home," one child was declaring, while the other was demanding a snack that was, unfortunately, still sitting on the grocery list she had forgotten at home. She had looked up, frustrated and tired, her eyes scanning the parking lot for a moment of escape, and that's when she saw it. She saw the old woman struggling, and then she saw the man walk towards her. At first, she thought it might be a family member or maybe a store employee. But as she watched them push the carts together, she realized it was neither. It was just a stranger helping another stranger. She was so captivated by the simple grace of the act that she momentarily forgot about the chaos in her back seat. It was like watching a silent movie, a story told without words but with so much meaning. And then, as they reached the cart corral and the man turned his head, the sunlight hit his face just right. The young mother gasped softly. She knew that face. Everyone knew that face. It was him. The one from the movies, the one her friends had crushes on, the one the internet called the internet's boyfriend. But seeing him here, in this ordinary setting, doing this extraordinarily ordinary thing, was something else entirely. It wasn't about the celebrity. It was about the confirmation of a rumor, the proof that the stories about his kindness were not just PR stunts. They were real. Without even thinking, she picked up her phone from the passenger seat. She didn't zoom in or try to get a perfect shot. She just discreetly tapped the screen, capturing a single, grainy photo from a distance. It wasn't a picture of a movie star. It was a picture of a moment of pure humanity. Later that evening, after the kids were finally bathed and in bed, the house was quiet. She sat on her couch, the television on but muted, and looked at the photo on her phone. She thought about the woman's face, the way it had changed from weary struggle to quiet awe. She thought about the man's simple offer of help. She felt a pull to share it, not because of who he was, but because of what it represented. In a world full of angry comments online and bad news on television, this was a different story. It was a good story. She opened up her social media app and uploaded the picture. She thought for a moment about what to write. She didn't want to write, "Guess who I saw?" That felt wrong. Instead, she typed out a few simple sentences. "Saw something today that restored my faith in humanity." An elderly woman was struggling with a long line of shopping carts, and this man, who just happened to be there, stopped what he was doing and helped her without a second thought. It wasn't about who he is. It was about what he did. We should all be a little more like this. She didn't even tag his name. She just posted it. She woke up the next morning to a phone that was buzzing constantly. Her post had gone viral. Not just a few likes, but tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. It was being shared and reshaped and commented on by people all over the world. But the most amazing part was the comment section. It wasn't just people saying, "Oh my God, it's him." It was people sharing their own stories. This reminds me of the time a stranger helped me change a flat tire in the rain. I saw a young man give his jacket to a homeless man last winter. My grandpa was just like this. He would help anyone. The post had become a digital campfire, with people gathering around to share stories of kindness and light. The story of the man and the woman in the parking lot had become a catalyst, a spark that ignited a wildfire of positivity. It was no longer just a story about a famous person being nice. It had become a powerful, collective statement about the goodness that exists in ordinary people every single day. And in the end, that was the real legacy of that quiet moment in the parking lot. It wasn't about one man's good deed. It was about how one good deed can remind millions of us of the good that lives inside ourselves.